So, welcome to today's presentation about how to stop phishing while also making life easier for users. It's a long way of saying passwordless, basically. I want to introduce myself. My name is Tom Åfloen. I'm going to turn on the camera so you see how I look, but I'm not going to have it turned on all the time. The double A there is pronounced Å because I have a Norwegian heritage, but I've lived in Sweden in most of my life. I live in Karlstad. I worked in the IT security business for about 23 years, which makes me feel really old. And I've focused on identities mostly all the time. Active Directory initially, PKI certificates, and then moving on to Azure AD lately. And I just checked, and my oldest test tenant for Azure AD is actually 7.5 years old. So I guess we can't call Azure AD new anymore, right? You may hear it, I have a bit of a cold. I've had this for the last week, so I hope my voice will keep up during the entire presentation. Let's continue for the agenda for today then. Just a quick overview. Why are passwords bad? I'm sure you already know this, but it's still good to have a recap of that. And why is MFA not the entire solution to protect our identities? And then on a conceptual level, how can you even log in without using a password? And I'm going to show you 3 ways of how you can do this, and then show some demos as well. And then I was supposed to hand over to Caroline from Yubico, but again, we need to reschedule that. And if you see the presentation window, you should see a question mark at the top right corner. Click on that and ask away for any questions you have. Some will be answered immediately, others will be answered at the end of that webinar. Right, so let's get started. So why are passwords bad? Well, you already know this, right? People are reusing passwords. The password they have in your organization, they also use for other services, for online retailers, for the kids' soccer team's website, wherever. And if those sites aren't as well protected as your organization sites are, then the password might get leaked and then people can sign in. People are being phished all the time. They are tricked into giving away their username and password. People get malware with keyloggers. People leave post-it notes. People use common passwords. You know all of these, right? There's a ton of attacks on passwords. And as it turns out, the password you choose isn't really that important. We have a table here. We're not going to go through it in detail. Just want to show you that the attack vector on password to the left, and then the far right, you see that does your password matter column. And mostly it's no, because most of these attacks actually give the bad guy the password. So even if it's super long, complex, and changed, the bad guy will get the password. So the password itself isn't really relevant. If you want to dig deeper into this, this is a Microsoft blog post called Your Password Doesn't Matter. That's a long URL, I realize that, but this webinar is being recorded, so you can look at it later, or you can just Google that blog post, and you can read more about why your password doesn't really matter. But I wouldn't say it doesn't matter. Of course, your password still matters, because we're not going to get passwordless right away. It's going to take years, even if ever, we're going to get rid of all the passwords. So we still need to have good passwords. I don't know if you recognize this guy. His name is Bill Burr. He was a middle manager at NIST long ago, many years ago. And he was actually given the task of, okay, you need to create rules on how we should protect user accounts. So with no technical or security formal training, he just sat down and thought about it and said, well, they should be complex, right? And they should probably be long. And I think we should change them often. And this was actually only intended to have for the government in the United States, but it became the de facto standard for everyone, the complexity, the change, and the length. But as it turned out, when we looked at the actual attacks that happened, these password rules didn't help. In fact, they were actually making things worse. So there are new password recommendations now in the last 3 years or so, where these things don't matter anymore. And Microsoft has summarized their view on it on this link. You can go there and take a look at it, but it's not just Microsoft. It's Microsoft, it's NIST themselves, and it's GCHQ. There are new password guidance that you should follow. Actually, Bill Burr has gone out and publicly apologized for all the trouble and confusion and irritation he caused with these security password rules that actually didn't help. So what's the new then? Well, you should at least have 8 characters password. That's shorter than regular, right? You should not require complexity anymore. That's just bad for users, doesn't matter for hackers. And you should also no longer change passwords, unless there's a reason to, of course. But the reason isn't time. It's more like attack and exposure and such. But on the other hand, you should ban common bad passwords. If people are using the password, even if they change the A for the @ sign and the S for the dollar and add an exclamation mark, that's a really bad password. So you should try to ban those. And there are tools to doing that today. And this can only be done at the time of setting the password. Otherwise, the systems usually can't read the password then. You should also educate your users, of course, not to reuse their passwords for private and work purposes. And you should use MFA. And I cannot stress how important this is. MFA is something you must have today. We looked at the attacks going backwards, and 99.9% of all these identity-based attacks would have been stopped using MFA. So if you haven't done this, do it now, okay? Don't wait, just do it. People say, well, we have to educate our users. We have other projects that takes more priority. Everyone doesn't have a phone. How are we gonna blah, blah, blah? We have seen companies that have had all these excuses, and then they were hit, and they were so sorry that they didn't turn this on. And when they actually did turn it on, of course, the day after the attack, it wasn't that big a deal anyway. So either you activate it now or you do it after the intrusion. So it's really important. That being said, why is MFA not the entire solution to protecting our identities? Well, there are at least 2 different types of attacks against MFA today. You have the real-time phishing, which means that a bad guy controls the session between you and the service you're supposed to authenticate to. Then the bad guy can take your credentials and sign in to the service. And since you think you are signing in, you will expect an MFA prompt. So you will approve that notification. You will type in that SMS code. So that bad guy will come in even though you have MFA turned on. The other attack vector is channel jacking. That basically means that you take over the way the MFA is delivered to the user. The most common one is SIM jacking. Basically, you find out the phone number that the user is using for MFA. You call your phone company and say, hey, I got a new phone, a new SIM card. Can you please redirect that phone number to me? And of course, the phone company should verify that it's actually the right user, but that isn't always the case. They can trick, they can fool, they can do research to be able to answer questions. So it's reasonable that you are the victim. And the most famous example is Twitter's CEO, Jack Dorsey. He was actually targeted by this channel jacking attack. But again, you still use MFA. NIST changed the recommendation into not using SMS because it's vulnerable to channel jacking. So say don't use SMS for MFA, but they realized that was a mistake, so they actually changed it back to say use SMS for MFA. That's fine, but look at options, because using SMS as MFA is enormously much securer than not using MFA at all, which was what happened when people saw that SMS was dangerous. Here is a table. Again, won't go through all of this either. There is a blog post for this as well. But different type of credentials have different type of attack vectors. Some of them are not vulnerable. The 3 last ones, which we're going to talk about here. That all your creds belong to us is not a typo. It doesn't sound grammatically correct, but it's actually a reference to a really old game on the Mega Drive from the early 90s called Zeroing. It was famous for its bad translation, and the bad guy in the intro cutscene said, all your base belong to us. So that's why they have that strange title. But again, read that blog post. I can recommend it. It's really good. So, okay, we have security from top to bottom, and we have convenience for the user from left to right. We know that passwords are really bad security, right? We looked at that. But convenience is fine. You basically just need to remember something. But if we add MFA to that, it does increase security, but it's also less convenient because you still need to remember your password and you also need to do something else, bring something along. So can we fix this? Can we make something better? And yes, that is where the passwordless comes in. It's high security and it is convenient. Again, if you have any questions, please ask them in the chat. Otherwise, I'll just continue. So on a more conceptual level, how can you even log in without using a password? It doesn't really make sense if you just look at it initially. Well, what you do is that you create a secure relationship between a device and an identity provider, such as Azure AD. So you have a secure relationship. And this secure relationship is secured by using asymmetric encryption. That means you have a private key that's sensitive and you have a matching public key that you can share. And those two have a relationship. If we compare with passwords, those are actually symmetric encryption because the password you enter at your side is the same password that the service needs to keep track of to make sure you are who you are. The private key is generated on the device and the private key never leaves the device. This is super secure. We never leave. The private key is never exposed. However, the matching public key, that can we share with people. So we actually send that to the IDP and we tie that to my user account saying, okay, this public key is my public key and I have the private key to prove it. And the private key is protected by hardware and usage requires some sort of gesture. And I've underlined usage here because it's not exposing the key, it's not sending the key, it's actually just using the key inside the authenticator. And what kind of gestures can we do to prove the usage? Well, we have the facial recognition or the fingerprint. Sorry, misspelled recognition there. You can also have a local pin on the device, and there's also more futuristic things where you can use your voice or wearables. I saw an example of using a ring and so on. But that is something you need to do locally to unlock the usage of the private key. And here, usually, there's some confusion. We are rolling out passwordless, so here you need to have a PIN. For users, there's not that big a difference of keeping track of a username, or a password, or a PIN. It's still something you need to remember. But remember that the password, anyone can use. If they find out your password, they can use it. They can impersonate you from anywhere. But the local PIN only unlocks the local device. So if someone shoulder surfs and looks when I enter my PIN, they cannot use that because that's tied to my device. It's just a local PIN. So even if it's still a password, it's much, much more secure. And again, most hardware today offer facial recognition such as Face ID or fingerprint and so on. So let's look at an example of how the flow works when we're using symmetric encryption, password in other words. The user goes to the service and clicks sign in, and the user then enters the username and the password to sign in, right? And that is then sent to the service, and the service compares that with the stored password for the user. And hopefully the service doesn't store the password in clear text. Many people still do, unfortunately. But even if you store the password in some sort of hash or salted hash, it is still derived, it's based on the actual password that is used for signing. And if those passwords match, then the user is signed in. But what happens if a bad guy gets a hold or can control the service? He will then have all the passwords, even though they might be somehow protected, but he still has control over them. It doesn't need to be that you get access to the keys or the database. You can actually just get possibility to change code in the service, which means that you can redirect the username and password so they also write it somewhere else and so on. So there's a big risk here because the user and the service has the same secret. If we then compare it with asymmetric encryption instead, what we are talking about now, the passwordless scenario, The user still visits the service, but the user then clicks on sign in passwordless. And then the service then asks the user's authenticator to sign a nonce with a private key. A nonce is basically just a random number. And by then signing this to prove you are in control of the private key. The authenticator wants to do this, but it requires an approval from the user with some sort of gesture, like a PIN, fingerprint, or Face ID. And then the authenticator will then sign the nonce and return it together with the username. Again, the private key never leaves the authenticator. And the service can then check, does this key match the public key stored for that user? And if it does, it lets the user in. And in this scenario, what happens if a bad guy gets control over the service? It doesn't matter, right? Because everything that's stored on the service side, the application side, is public information. So there's no need for anyone to manage the secrets anymore. And this is awesome. If I was to have a web page that requires sign-in for some reason, if I could stop keeping secrets but still allowing users to sign in, that would give a lot more easier job to me, right? So what are the 3 ways today we can use to sign in without a password? We have the Windows Hello for Business. We have the Microsoft Authenticator, and we have the FIDO2 security keys. So which one is the best? Well, we can't really say. They're all good in their own ways, and they have their own advantages and disadvantages. Hello for Business, I would say, is super user-friendly and secure. The user basically opens the laptop, looks at it, and he's signed in. No password sent, only this public key exchange. So it's super user-friendly. You can also have a PIN if you don't have facial recognition or fingerprint. But it requires you to have a Windows 10 device. What happens if you have Macintosh or Linux? It's also somehow limited in number of users. You can't have unlimited number of users signing into a laptop because you need to enroll the TPM chip on that laptop. But it's a really good option. If that doesn't work, you can use the Microsoft Authenticator, which means you keep the secret on your phone instead of on the TPM chip on the platform of the computer. And by using this, you don't need to have all the requirements of the Windows version and the AD set up for these computers. And if the computer is not AD joined or managed in Azure AD, you can still use the authenticator to sign in. But that doesn't always work either. Let's say you're in an area where phones are not allowed, for instance, or there's no coverage, or you can't supply a phone to all your employees. Maybe you can't give all the factory workers or the personal staff at the restaurant their own smartphone. Well, then the FIDO security key is another really good option, where you keep the secret in external hardware that's really high security. And then you can just remove it from the computer and put it in next computer. So you can have anyone signing into a computer using that small little dongle. I can really recommend that solution in many scenarios as well. I'm going to show some demos. The first demo will be of Windows Hello for Business. But the thing is, I can't really demo this. What I can do is I can lock my computer, I can put my finger on the finger reader, and it's unlocked. And that's a really bad demo because you don't see anything. And again, when I do this live, I can lock the computer, but I don't really know how that will work when I'm having this webinar, so I'm not going to do it. But basically, lock computer, unlock computer, that is Windows Hello for Business, if you have set up the infrastructure correctly. Let's go on to the next demo instead, the Authenticator app. Here we have a web browser that I'm going to try to sign in, and I also have a phone that I have enrolled. So I start visiting a web page that needs sign in. And this identity provider here knows that I have enrolled with my app. So it knows that I'm going to use passwordless for this username, which means that it doesn't actually prompt me for a password, right? Instead, it shows me approve this sign in. I don't even get a chance to enter my password. And the phone then dings and says, you have a sign in request. And here I need to click on a number. This is not to be confused with the secret gesture you do to unlock the key. This is just to prove that you are actually present here, or is it you who is doing this? If you're out walking and you get this prompt, it's less likely that you click on one of these numbers than it is compared to clicking yes or no. So it's just to make sure, is it really you who is doing this authentication? If someone tries to trick you into signing in somewhere else and so on. So I just click on the matching number, and then I get prompted to unlock the security key, the private key. My phone supports Face ID, so that's what I'm using. But if it's not me in front of the phone, if a friend borrows my phone, it's going to fail because Face ID failed, then I won't be able to sign in. So it needs to be me. If I then show my face for the phone, it's going to work and I'm signed in. So basically, enter username, click on the correct matching number, show your face, and I'm signed in. And again, super secure. No one can sniff or spoof or trick me into signing in the wrong place. So that was the Authenticator app demo. I'm going to show a little bit about the FIDO2 security keys, but first some background. FIDO2 security keys are hardware keys. They are based on the FIDO2 standard, and it needs to be FIDO2 to support passwordless, because these keys have existed for a long time. I think my oldest YubiKey is 10 years old now, and those support older technologies. Like you can have the 6-digit numbers, you can have one-time password, the universal second factor that they developed, but all of these are a regular MFA. You still need your username and your password, and you can use those old keys as a multi-factor authentication option. But FIDO2, that's a different story. So what is FIDO2? Well, when you try to sign in, you sign in from a client. And you also need to use an authenticator. And the authenticator can be the key or Hello for Business or the app. And there's a protocol here, and that protocol is called Client to Authenticator Protocol. And the client then also needs to talk to the service or the identity provider. And that protocol is called WebAuthn. And this is basically what FIDO2 is. It is a common name for these two open protocols, open standards. So if it supports CTAP and WebAuthn, then it supports FIDO2. And FIDO is ratified by the FIDO Alliance, which is an organization that has the purpose of developing open standards for secure authentication. And these are the really heavy hitters in the business. These are just some of the members. And as you can see, we have all the hardware manufacturers, you have the banks, you have the big web services providers, NIST, and so on. So basically, I see OneWinn there as well, but that's just a logo from the PowerPoint. But we still like this FIDO2, of course. So this is the future. This is just not some random thing. This is where we're heading for. So let's look at the demo then for the security key login. Again, I'm going to visit a web page that wants me to sign in. And instead of entering the username, I don't need to do that. I just click on the sign in options and I choose sign in with a security key. And here I get a prompt saying, please insert your security key. Usually I have it inserted already, so I don't see this prompt, but I just wanted to show you how it looks if you haven't plugged in your USB key yet. So now I'm going to plug in my USB key. And it says this security key can't be used. So why am I showing this? Well, this is the thing that is killing phishing. If someone is trying to force me or trick me into signing in to somewhere else than what I'm expecting to sign in, it's not going to work. You can trick a user to sign in the wrong place, but you can't trick a security key to sign in into the wrong place. So this key apparently hasn't enrolled to login.microsoft.com, which is the identity provider here. So that is how you stop phishing using security keys. Okay, I'll remove that incorrect key and I'll remove a key that has enrolled to this service. And it prompts me to enter my PIN. This key doesn't have biometrics, so I'm using a PIN to unlock the local secret. So I'll just enter my PIN. And here I'm prompted to touch my security key. Here is the way I prove my presence when it comes to security keys. For the app, I needed to choose a number. Here, I just need to physically touch my security key. And this is also to prevent remote hacking. If I have my key inserted and someone gets my PIN code, what happens if they use RDP or some other remote tool? Well, they can't do it, right? They can't misuse this because they physically need to be present to actually sign in here. So I'm going to touch my key, and this key in this demo has actually enrolled with 3 different accounts to this identity provider. So I just basically have to choose which one do you want to sign in with. Okay, and I'm signed in. Again, I talk a lot during these demos, but I click on choose security key, enter the PIN, touch it, and I'm in. Really, really simple. So that's the end of the demo. I wasn't sure if I was going to have time to show this, but since Yubico unfortunately couldn't join us, I will do this anyway. We have a demo of the enrollment scenario for the security key. So in this case, we have a user called Tim, and he has just gotten a YubiKey, and he is going to enroll this to his identity provider. So what he does is following instructions, and he goes to the page called myprofile.microsoft.com. There's different ways to come here, but he still needs to sign in as usual, right? Because he haven't enrolled to Passwordless yet. He then comes to the new My Profile page and clicks on Security Info, where you register these things. And this is a sensitive site, so you need to do MFA to get here. This is the regular old classic MFA. So he needs to MFA himself in order to enroll. And here you can see he has phone and email. He's going to add a method called the security key. Here's also where you add the Authenticator app. Choose the interface for the key and click Next. Here's prompted, can we use the key to log into Microsoft.com? And he needs to insert the USB key he got. And since this is a totally new key, he needs to create the PIN because this is the first time he uses it. And this PIN will be used later on to unlock the secret on it. Again, need to touch it to prove presence. And can we use this key for this site? We need to name the key, and the recommendation is to use more than one key. In case you lose your key, it's still good to get in. If you don't use your password, you might be able to forget your password. So keep an extra YubiKey somewhere, please. They're really durable though. I washed mine in the washer 3 times and it still works. Okay, let's sign out this user who is now enrolled into Passwordless with a security key. So now we need to sign in again, but this time we're not going to enter the password. We're going to sign in with a security key. Enters the PIN he just created. Touches it to prove presence. And he's signed in. And you notice he's signed into the security page, which means that a YubiKey sign-in or a security sign-in counts as an MFA factor. Okay, let's delete the key as well. Let's say I lost my key. I'm not going to use it anymore. I delete the key. I can't change the physical key, but I can change the connection with the key to my account. So I remove the public association with the key to my account. So now let's see what happens if we try to sign in again using the key that hasn't changed, by the way. The key is still the same and the private key still exists. So I try to sign in with the security key, still need to enter my PIN, and I sign the nonce to sign in. But I'm not allowed. Again, the association between my private key and my user account was removed because I deleted that. So that's how it looks when you enroll for end users. So there are a few steps, but it's possible to do. And after that, you can basically forget your password.
Tom, yes. We have a question.
Yep.
Is Microsoft Authenticator an option if you have a hybrid environment where your Windows clients are domain joined to on-prem AD?
Yes, it is. To make this work, you need to be somehow talking to Azure AD. So if you have a hybrid environment and your computers are hybrid Azure AD joined, this works. Well, basically, Authenticator, I'm thinking about Windows Hello for Business. The Authenticator should absolutely work. Yeah, if you're using the Authenticator, well, the sign-in thing is not connected to the computer anymore, right? I can use my Authenticator to sign into your Windows client, not to sign into the client, but to sign into web pages. But if you need to sign into the Windows client, that's a good question. Because you can use your YubiKey, your security key, to sign in to your AD joined device if it's hybrid Azure AD joined as well. But the Authenticator, that was a good question. I need to look that up. I'll need to get back to you if Authenticator is supported. I know that security keys are supported for domain joined on-prem AD if they're also hybrid Azure AD joined. It's also really important to realize that even if you do native Azure AD join, you don't have a local AD. You join your computer to Azure AD natively, and you enroll for this passwordless or security key. You can actually still access on-premises things. And this is really impressive because even though you're signing into Azure AD with your Azure AD joint computer, your Azure AD can set up a trust relationship with local AD. So you can actually get a Kerberos ticket valid for your local AD from Azure AD. That's not the answer for the question, but it's a really good important thing.
Just to follow up on that we had a webinar on Tuesday on the modern workplace, smart way to a modern workplace, where we talked about how to hybrid join the workstations and how to get that fairly easy.
Right.
To get
it's on a colleague of ours. Exactly.
Yeah.
He actually shows a demo where he signs into Azure AD using Hello for Business and accesses a local file share on the local network. Yeah. That's a good thing to check. But yeah, I need to get back to you if Authenticator works to sign into computers. I know that security keys does. If it doesn't, I'm pretty sure it soon will.
So hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Well, it didn't, but I need to find out because that's interesting things. Yeah. Okay. So how do you get started then on your passwordless journey here? Well, Microsoft actually have a white paper that's called Passwordless Protection. You can find it here. Go there, read it. Among other things, it includes a table where it discusses the 3 different solutions: Hello for Business, Authenticator app, and FIDO2. Maybe it doesn't say it here as well. Yeah, you can read through the prerequisites and experience and the scenarios that it enables and so on. So this is a good way to get started. And if you want more help, you can just contact Olof, who just spoke, my colleague, and he can help you with this. I want you to note that we are a Yubico certified partner. And again, Yubico was supposed to join us for this session. We need to do a follow-up for that. And we actually have a special offer for a YubiKey Start Kit if you're attending this webinar. The first 10 people who contact Olof here will actually be able to get a Start Kit with 50 YubiKeys. It's the YubiKey 5 NFC version in a great looking box with some instructions on how to enable it in Office 365 as well. And you will get it at a 50% discount, not 15, 50, half price off. So contact Olof if you're interested in looking into this, and we'll be able to offer that through our partnership with Yubico.
Yeah, and again, the offer stands September, the rest of September.
Yeah, good point.
So just email me if you want to know more, or grab that. 10 first, get that.
And here is where I was supposed to hand over to Caroline. But again, sorry, Caroline, we'll have to reschedule this due to some issues. And contact Olof, send him an email if you want to be a part of that follow-up session as well, where we go more into details about YubiKeys, and not only the passwordless feature, but also the other. You can use YubiKeys as a smart card. You can use them for one-time passwords. You can use them for a lot of different areas. There's a lot of different form factors and so on. So I really recommend you looking into YubiKeys if you have the possibility to do that. Well, that was it from my point of view. Again, if you have more questions, please paste them. Olof, do you have anything else before we wrap this up?
No, I think we covered what we wanted. And as you said, feel free to ask any questions if you have any. We can answer them right now. Or as you mentioned, email me and we'll contact you if you want to try out the introduction package to Yubico.
Yeah. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap it up and pause the recording. We can hang on in the meeting a few more minutes to answer a question if you want to. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everyone.